Yeah. And in that vein, I'm excited to have this guest on because she does rad media herself. She does wonderful journalism, but she is multi-talented and she's part of an upcoming event, the Disability Futures Virtual Festival, which is coming up July 19th. And it'll feature 2 days of art and ideas for some of today's leading disabled artists, writers, performers, and designers. So there's a lot there to talk about. Please welcome Jen Deerenwater.
Hi.
Hey, thanks for being here, Jen.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
It's good to have you here. How you been doing?
Busy.
Yeah.
I keep saying that I'm going to stop working so much and make more room in my schedule for myself. And then something new comes up and it's like, sleep. What's that? I don't need that.
True. Speaking of I started out talking about all the censorship and everything and how you have to be inside of acceptable, state sponsored talking points in order to be on a lot of these platforms. You've seen your own stuff. Like, every time I talk to you, it seems that someone has, made a deal to work with you and then revoked it once they found out you were going to talk about, or it's always a fight, isn't it?
It is. I sometimes feel like in the quest to have diversity, I get called in to do things, and then people are suddenly surprised that my politics are very far left radical. And I'm always surprised by that. Like, have you read anything I write? Have you listened to me on interviews? Like, I don't really hide my politics.
I guess some of these outlets, if they're big enough, they think, well, once we bring her into the fold, she'll just want to do anything to make us happy or something. I don't know. Bad choice.
I did a Washington Post Live interview on Tuesday, and I mostly played nice, but it was about disability in America. And we were talking a lot about media. And so I mentioned, I was like, I'm going to ask the Washington Post and all legacy media, like, how many of you have deaf or disabled people as journalists? How many are running the newsrooms or radio stations? Like, can you name any? Are any of them BIPOC? So like, even when you're giving me a platform, you better expect I'm going to hold you accountable.
Well, I think they were secretly hoping that by having you on, that meant they didn't have to do those things. They were like, yeah, we had her on once, so that covers it.
That was our disabled Indian. We're done for the next century. We don't need any more of those.
So tell me about this event coming up. Sounds cool.
Yeah, so the Disability Futures Fellow. So it's part of the Disability Futures Fellowship. It's the first fellowship of its kind that is specifically for deaf, disabled, and ill creatives and artists. There are 20 fellows. I'm one of them. And we run the gamut across disabilities, across mediums. One of the fellows is an architect. We have others that do visual art. I'm a journalist and a writer primarily. And so it was really made to help support our careers and to give us the resources that we need, which are so rarely available for us, as well as they've worked with us a lot so that we can make sure we all receive fellowship payments without having to worry about potentially losing like SSDI benefits or our health insurance. Because that's the other thing, when you're disabled, in order to get the health care and the benefits and things you need, the government requires you stay in poverty.
Yeah, I was talking to someone about that the other day. It's like you get, you're in poverty, getting benefits, and then you get a small amount of money and you like can't take it or something, or you're going to be knocked off your benefits.
Right. And I mean, I could be making, I hesitate to say comfortable because I don't know what a comfortable living is anymore in these days and times.
Yeah. Well, it's only $32 for a cocktail at the bar. So
yeah, exactly. But I could be living a little bit more comfortably, have some savings, things like that, be doing better. But I will never make enough to pay for all the healthcare costs and having a home health aide. So I have to stay within this income restriction, which also means it greatly restricts my growth as an artist, as a journalist. And so Disability Futures Fellowship, they've been working with us to make sure that we get these supports that we need without hopefully making us lose our healthcare or other services. And so it's funded by the Ford and Carnegie W. Mellon Foundations, and it's administered through the United States Artists Organization. And next week, getting to the festival part.
Yeah.
So next week on the 19th and the 20th, some of us fellows, along with some other folks, have done different events and different events online. There were like boxes sent out to some people who registered for the convening, and in those boxes had like tactile art and things in them, including the CD of the song Others Like Me that myself and Marcy Angeles and Tony Enos wrote and produced for this event. We are specifically doing a panel on the 20th, July 20th at 2 p.m. Eastern time. It's a pre-recorded panel, and that's where we're going to have the world premiere of the song and the music video. And then we all talk about, disability and illness and the digital divide and how those things impact Indigenous artists.
Yeah, I saw something about that. It's one of these things you kind of, I think most people never really think about, but it said that you're doing some of the distribution of the song on CD because many Indigenous in this country don't have access to other forms of receiving music.
Right. Yeah. The digital divide is huge for us. I think that I think a lot of people even born and raised in the so-called US don't realize geographically just how large this country is and how much of it is rural.
Yeah.
There's a lot more going on than just the coast and that, city, Chicago in the middle of, quote, flyover country.
Yeah.
So, and a lot of the country doesn't have telecommunications. And that really is a problem once you hit reservations and tribal villages and, tribal lands. So a lot of our people just don't have access to telecoms on our rural lands, but then even our urban-based people. So 71% of us live in urban and suburban areas, but because so many Native people live in poverty, we don't often have the money to afford internet service and all the latest gadgets and things. So one of the things we're doing for this is distributing free DVDs that will have the music video and the panel on it and the song. And so that's a way to kind of try to help bridge that divide.
Yeah, it's important. I mean, and people wonder why when they drive across the country, the stores still have CD bins for sale. And they're like, they came from New York City, and they're like, why is anyone buying CDs anymore? But,
yeah. I mean,
complicated. And during the pandemic, so many of these classrooms were doing schooling, virtually, and then you had kids. I remember one of the things was one of the photos was a kid sitting outside of Taco Bell trying to get a Wi-Fi signal because they don't have one at home.
Yeah, that's pretty common for a lot of Native youth. They have to go to the parking lot outside of a Starbucks or something to try to get service. A lot of our people will use libraries or community centers or tribal resources. And because of COVID, all of those things got shut down. So that really just further squelched our access to telecoms and basically our access to the whole world. I mean, unemployment, EBT, Medicare, Medicaid, all these things, like you pretty much apply online now. But how do you do that if you don't have internet and you don't have a computer and whatnot?
Yeah, it always hurts your chances of getting a job if they see that you applied from a Taco Bell. It doesn't help, which of course is a form of discrimination. I wanted to ask you. I mean, you could probably talk for an hour on this subject, but what do you feel are the issues most facing disabled folks in the United States right now?
How many shows can I do with you? Because that could go on for a while. There are just so many. I think, and this is something I just said on Tuesday, is that kind of how I feel as a Native person, where pretty much all the decisions that are made that impact Native people are made by non-Native people. Well, that's the same for deaf and disabled people. All the people making decisions that impact every single aspect of our life, like if we're even able to use the bathroom somewhere, like those decisions are made by the abled. And so
it's funny that conversation's being had in our media, but only about Britney Spears.
And you know, and the sad part of that is like what happened to Britney is horrendous, but it happens to disabled people all the time. I mean, in this country, it's still legal under the Buck v. Bell Supreme Court case to sterilize disabled people against our will. You know, and we know that this happens to BIPOC women and people. So if you're deaf or disabled and also BIPOC, I mean, you probably are going to have higher rates of, you know, being forced onto long-acting birth control or such. And so like, I get frustrated with the conversation around Britney because I'm like, well, yes, it's horrible, but this has been an ongoing problem that, you know, disabled people who are not famous or white or wealthy have been talking about for years, and people just aren't listening.
Yeah.
You know, I really think that kind of how I feel as a Native, I feel as a disabled person that our communities and our people could advance and be doing so much better if the goddamn government just got its fucking boot off our neck. If they let us have the services that we need and deserve, let us live in good housing, have good food, be able to earn a living. It's still legal in this country to pay disabled people sub-minimum wage.
Really?
You know, yeah, it is still legal to do that. You know, to which I also get frustrated when I look at other movements like Fight for 15. I'm like, that's great, but why aren't you fighting for that for disabled people? You know, why do people doing prison abolition work leave deaf and disabled people out, even though we have really high rates of suffering police brutality and incarceration? You know, I really just from the top down, from federal government down to our grassroots movements, the abled are failing us and they are leaving us to die. And just like I believe in tribal sovereignty and self-determination for Native people, I believe in self-determination by disabled people. We are the experts on our lives and we are the ones who know what we need. So people need to just shut up and listen to us and do what we say.
I like that take. Just shut up and listen to us.
I appreciate doing like shows with you and people like you because I'm like, oh, I can just fucking cuss all I want.
Yeah.
I can say whatever the hell I want to say. I don't have to censor myself.
Nope. Although I have to watch myself because I'll go on shows now assuming you can curse, and then they'll be like, whoa, we're on radio or something.
Yeah. That's an FCC fine, damn it.
Yeah, exactly. I just want to make sure I say the name again because I want people to find it if they're interested. The Disability Futures Virtual Festival. It's July 19th and 20th. And I posted the website in the chat, disabilityfutures.splashthat.com. So I would love people to check it out. What will people get, at the festival? I know you'll be singing there, but there's other events as well.
Yeah. There's there's a bit of a podcast from one of the fellows who wrote a piece. There's, I believe, a meditation event through, it's called Black Power Naps, I believe was the name. There are all kinds of things that you can do during that. Of course, we've made it accessible as possible. There's ASL, there's captioning, all of those things available. But I'll also say that my organization, Crushing Colonialism, is going to host a Facebook watch party. And so in that watch party, we have 5 really big Indigenous prize packages that we're going to raffle off. And so they include, T-shirts, blankets, tote bags, signed books and CDs, all kinds of great stuff from Indigenous artists and creatives. And so that is on the Crushing Colonialism Facebook page. And that is, the tag is at ircc.resist.
Cool. Excellent. While I have you here, I want to ask you about another very important topic that seems to finally have gotten some national attention is these quote unquote residential schools, which I did a segment on, but I think that is the most ridiculous euphemism that I've ever heard. Residential schools. It should be called, rape and killing centers or something. Just phenomenal. All the, I mean that in a sad way. All the bodies they're finding, and they're talking mainly about them in Canada, but the equivalent shit went on here in the United States as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there were. So we call them. They're called boarding schools here in the U.S. just to make them sound even more ridiculous than what they actually are. But we had. I want to say there were 365 boarding schools in the so-called U.S. and there were 150-ish in Canada. And people talk about these issues like, oh, this happened generations ago. And one, it still matters. It doesn't matter if it's generations ago. And two, this isn't generations ago. The last residential school in Canada closed in 1990. The last of the majority of the boarding schools in this country closed in the 1980s and 1990s. We have boarding and residential school survivors that are still alive.
And for those who've never heard of these, I just want to be clear. This is the place where Native children, places where Native children were largely kidnapped or pressured. The family is pressured to turn over their kids, and then they're supposed to be, turned into culturally acceptable American or Canadian children, which of course is a form of cultural genocide. And even the Canadian governmental report that came out in 2015 called it cultural genocide. So they're no longer denying that aspect. They may be denying other aspects, such as the sheer number of kids that were killed in some form or another.
Mm-hmm. I mean, the things that happened at those schools were horrendous. I mean, just constant sexual and physical abuse, mental, emotional abuse. I mean, our children were put through horrific things. Some of them were murdered. Some died from illnesses or starvation. Many tried to escape. And parents in tribal nations had no choice. You either sent your kids or you got arrested. And it wasn't in this country, in the so-called U.S., until 1978, I believe, when the Indian Child Welfare Act was passed. We had to have policy because so many Native children have been stolen and are still being stolen from us now through other means of state and Christian violence. But it wasn't until 1978 that there was finally a law in place that allowed Native people and communities to say, we're not going to send our kids to these schools anymore. I was born in 79. I mean, this is stuff that's happening within my lifetime.
Yeah.
And it was purposeful genocide. There's no doubt on that. I mean, the man who started the first boarding school here in this country is Richard Henry Pratt. He's the man behind the term and the policy, kill the Indian, save the man. He started the first boarding school in Carlisle, Pennsylvania, and I've been there. That place is horrendous. There's a guard shack. What school needs a guard shack? There's a cemetery on the side of the road where there are graves marked as unknown. What kind of school needs a cemetery?
Yeah.
And to add insult to injury, the site of the boarding school, of the Carlisle boarding school, is now the site of the Army College of War, where I had to go through a background check before they would let me go onto the campus. Like, how fucked is that you made Native children come here, including children from my tribe, and now I have to go through your fucking background check to come onto this land? Like,
yeah, and I read that they had meant to. They had meant to cover up basically the unmarked grave of so many dead children, and so it was at the back of the Army school. But then they ended up shifting the entire area, and the entrance is now the back. So now basically you go in the front, and there's a massive grave of children right as you're entering.
Yeah. And who knows how many children died that as a result of these schools, but didn't die at the schools. I've read stories of once the schools realized children were going to die, they sent them home. because they
Yeah.
didn't want them dying at their schools.
Yeah, and the other thing is just not a surprise, what a catastrophic job our mainstream media has done on this. Besides just ignoring it, I'd say that's protocol number one. But when I was looking these things up, I found one as recent as 2007 when NPR did a story on how amazing the Carlisle School was for creating football players, and that they talked about Pratt like he was a hero for football who had gone, bravely gone and scouted, quote unquote, Native Americans to be on the football team, and how great the team became, and not a mention of any kind of death or kidnapping or cultural genocide.
Yeah, I imagine they were probably speaking about Jim Thorpe, who was a very famous Native athlete who was at the Carlisle School. I think he was in the Olympics at one point. And so a lot of Native community, we do kind of hold Thorpe up as a hero of sorts. But, something that I recently learned about him is that there is a town in Pennsylvania called Thorpe, and it's named after him. And his remains are there against the will of his nation. Like, he was brought there and put there as basically kind of a marketing device for the town. Excuse me. And his tribe can't get his remains back. The town won't give him up. So he can't properly leave to rest.
That's certainly in line with Carlisle, because many people are still trying to get remains back from that school.
Yeah.
Well, Jen, thank you so much for being here. Is there anything I'm missing that I should be asking about, or any websites we should give out?
Go to crushingcolonialism.org. Crushing Colonialism is an organization that I founded, and we work to uplift the voices of indigenous multimedia makers. You can also learn more about me and the work I do at jdierenwater.com. And don't forget to go register for Disability Futures Disability Futures Festival, and for Crushing Colonialism's Facebook watch party.
Cool. Thank you so much, Jen. I really appreciate you taking the time to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having me on.
Talk to you soon.
All righty. Bye.
Bye.